You ever raise a child with both hands and still watch him grow up with empty ones? That truth will bruise you in places you didn't know your heart could ache. My name is Margaret Cole, 61 years old, mother of one son, and I wish I could tell you this story starts with gratitude. It doesn't. It starts in my own kitchen on a Saturday morning, sunlight coming in like it always does, catching the dust in the air. Only this time, the house didn't feel mine. Not really. My son Daniel stood there leaning on my counter like he owned the place, like I was staff in a home he never bought. He cleared his throat the way people do when a sentence is coming that they already know will hurt you. Mom, he said, the vacation is $3,000 each. If you can't afford it, it's okay. Just stay back and clean the house. He didn't flinch, didn't stutter, just tossed my dignity into the sink like a dirty spoon. I stared at him, not long enough for him to notice, just long enough for me to feel my chest tighten, cleaning, as if raising him alone wasn't enough cleaning for one lifetime, as if I hadn't scrubbed floors while holding him on my hip, as if my knees hadn't known tile and prayer at the same time. I simply nodded and wiped my hands on a dish towel. I don't know whether the cloth caught the water or caught my tears first. They were packing in the living room, my son and his wife, Jade. Designer suitcases, airport outfits, laughter like they were starring in their own little commercial. Meanwhile, I stood by the sink washing one single mug I had already washed twice. Sometimes holding still is the only way to keep from breaking. I remembered a very different Saturday. He was 5. I was tying my shoes for my shift at the nursing home. He hugged my leg tight and said, "Mommy, don't go. Stay home with me." And I promised him, one day, baby, one day I won't have to work so much. I kept that promise. I worked. I saved. I stretched pennies. And somehow in his memory, I became someone who never did enough. "Mom, it's fine," Jade said, walking past me like breeze. "Sometimes you need rest." Or, she glanced at the broom leaning in the corner. "Just stay busy around the house." Busy. That's what they thought I was. A woman who needs tasks, not a woman who needs respect. Before we go further, I need to ask you something. If you're listening to this, and you've ever been made to feel small in a home you built with your back and your hope, just drop me a little heart in the comments. Doesn't have to be big. Just one heart. So I know I'm not alone in this. I kept wiping the same counter. Quiet. Silence makes people bold. They started planning their airport photos, restaurants, spa days. Daniel didn't look at me once with softness. Not once like the little boy I used to kiss goodnight with cracked hands from scrubbing other people's houses. "Don't worry, Mom," he said, grabbing his keys. "We'll send pics. Maybe next time." Maybe next time. As if respect is a luxury vacation I didn't qualify for. I held my breath until the door shut behind them and the house exhaled. Then I rinsed the mug again, not because it was dirty, but because I needed something to hold before I shattered. I stood there in my quiet kitchen, towel in hand, pulse thick in my ears. Hurt can sometimes feel like heat, spreading slow until you're sure the whole house must be on fire. Then it happened. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text alert from the bank. 4 charges. Luxury travel. Thousands of dollars. All in Jade's name. For bookings. A total of $14,872 charged to my card without my knowledge. For a moment, my knees softened. Then something else woke up inside me. Not anger, not yet, something calmer and colder. I didn't gasp. I didn't shout. I just looked at the numbers, wiped my hands dry, and whispered to my empty kitchen. All right, because sometimes the quietest moment is the one right before a person remembers their worth. And I remembered mine. I stood there a long moment after that text alert, like the air itself had thickened. There's a particular silence that lives in a wounded house, not dramatic, not loud, just still. The kind of quiet where even the refrigerator hum sounds like judgment. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't frantic. Grief has a way of slowing the blood before it boils. I picked up my phone, unlocked it with a steady thumb, and opened the bank message again, reading those numbers line by line like I was memorizing a betrayal. Luxury resort, airline confirmation, spa package. The total stared back at me like a smirk. They didn't make these plans last minute. They had time to think, to type, to enter my card information digit by digit, to click confirm 4 different times. That's what hurt. The time it takes to betray someone you live with. Every time my eyes hit that total, $14,872, I felt something inside me harden instead of break. I sat down at my kitchen table. I didn't reach for my purse or coat. I reached for my glasses, wiped them on the hem of my shirt, and set my phone on the table like it was an opponent I needed to study. Then I began. Screenshot. Save. Screenshot. Save. I tapped slowly, carefully, each picture stored in a new folder. I titled Receipts. I even whispered it as I typed, like giving it a name made it real. I screen recorded scrolling through each transaction, pausing where their names appeared. This wasn't about anger. This was about truth. Truth needs proof, or else it looks like emotion. And I'd spent too many years being accused of taking things personally. When I finished, I opened my email and quietly sent the files to myself. I didn't rush. Every tap felt like a stitch, sewing myself back together, one careful motion at a time. When I hit send, a small wave of breath left my chest, like my body approved. My phone rang then, a familiar ringtone I hadn't changed in years. Miriam, my friend of 30 years, the one who knew me when I was 27, working nights and praying mornings. She was the type to talk loud, laugh louder, and tell you the truth whether you wanted to hear it or not. I stared at her, name glowing across the screen. For a moment, I imagined answering and telling her everything. I pictured her voice rising, her saying, "You mean to tell me that, boy?" followed by the sigh she saves for when life tries to break me again. I imagined her offering to drive over with a bottle of something sweet and 2 glasses, insisting we sit on my porch until the pain got tired of us. But shame is a thief that steals your tongue first. I didn't want to say it out loud. Saying it out loud would carve it into me. I let the phone ring until it stopped. Then I rested my palms flat on the table. When it buzzed again, her voicemail notification, I swallowed. Shame tastes like metal. Bitter. Heavy. A message popped up a few seconds later. Call me. Haven't heard your voice today. It sat there like a hand extended. I didn't touch it. Instead, I pressed the side button and shut the screen off. Not because I didn't trust her. I didn't trust myself not to break. I stood, poured myself a glass of water, and watched the ripples settle before lifting it. Cold water, steady hands. A good sign. My mother used to say, when your limbs obey you, your mind is still your own. I guess she was right. I placed my phone face down. not to ignore the world, but to claim a little space where my dignity could sit without witnesses. I wasn't going to cry, not yet. Tears waste strategy if they fall too soon. I walked to the window and tucked the curtain aside, just enough to see the driveway outside. Their tire marks were still in the dust, faint but present. Proof they were gone. Proof they thought I'd stay right where they left me, quiet, grateful, obedient. I let the curtain fall back into place and whispered, softer than a prayer, steadier than anger, "Tomorrow morning, I call the bank." Then I exhaled, not shaky, not broken, just firm, like a woman who finally remembered she belonged to herself before she belonged to anybody else. And in that still room, with the sun slipping lower and the fridge humming in the background, a new kind of quiet settled, not wounded aware. Morning light came in thin and pale, the kind that doesn't warm a room. It just reveals things. I sat on the edge of my bed for a moment before standing. Sleep hadn't touched me, but exhaustion hadn't claimed me either. There's a middle place the heart rests when it's too tired to break and too awake to forget. The house was quiet, not peaceful quiet, tense quiet, like walls holding their breath. I moved slowly, like each step needed permission. My phone was already in my hand before I reached the kitchen. I didn't rehearse what to say. Hurt has a way of sharpening your voice without you practicing a thing. I dialed the customer service number printed on the back of my debit card. The same card they used like it was oxygen they were entitled to inhale. The line rang twice before a young, overly cheerful voice answered. "Good morning. Thank you for calling," as if she had no idea she was about to help undo betrayal one button at a time. "Yes," I said, calm, steady. "I need to report unauthorized charges." I gave my name, my card details, the transactions. Not a single tremor touched my voice. I didn't explain emotions. Banks don't process feelings. They process facts. I leaned against the counter, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the small dent on the wall from when Daniel once swung his book bag too wild on the first day of 8th grade. I remember fussing and then hugging him. Anyway, funny how memory only delivers the soft parts when you're scraping against the sharp ones. While I waited on hold for the representative to pull up my records, I turned to start coffee. My hands moved out of habit, but my stomach didn't want anything warm. Still, I filled the kettle. Doing keeps you from drowning while feeling tries to drag you under. When she returned, her voice turned serious. "Yes, ma'am. I see the 4 travel charges. You're saying you did not authorize these?" "No," I said, one word, clean and hard as glass. "The total is $14,872, correct?" she asked. I swallowed once. "Correct." She asked a few more questions, security, confirmation, timestamps. I answered each like I was reciting a script my life depended on. In a way, I was. "We'll cancel the card," she said. "A new one will be mailed to you. In the meantime, no further charges can go through on this account." I nodded, though she couldn't see me, grateful the world still gave some people consequences. When I hung up, the kitchen felt heavier, like the air had thickened again around the truth. I turned to put the kettle back when I caught something. A small pile of laundry in my hallway basket. Daniel's shirt, the one he wore yesterday. A pair of jade socks tucked inside each other, neat, almost delicate. They're clothes. Their scent faint, but familiar. I stood there staring at that basket for a long breath. Habit is a powerful leash. I picked up the shirt and laid it smooth on the counter. I turned on the tap, filled a small basin, added a drop of detergent. My fingers worked almost on memory. Rinse, rub, rinse. Caring doesn't disappear just because respect gets stolen. Some parts of motherhood cling like fabric softener, gentle, invisible, stubborn. Halfway through scrubbing, I froze. The water ran over my hands, warm then cool. I looked down at the shirt and realized I was washing proof of presence that didn't deserve my labor anymore. My throat tightened, not anger, not tears, a kind of quiet mourning. I wrung the shirt out slowly, draped it neatly over the drying rack, then washed my hands as if I needed to rinse history off my skin. When I dried them, I pressed the towel to my palms a second longer than necessary, grounding myself to a life that suddenly felt both familiar and foreign. I picked up my phone again, ready to finish what I started. I dialed back, reached the fraud department this time. The voice on the other end was older, steadier. Maybe she'd heard enough stories like mine to know pain through breathing patterns. "We'll notify the hotel and airline," she said. Her tone was gentle, but the words landed firm. I exhaled slowly, a breath that tasted like steel. And that's where I left it, for now. The morning stretched slow, like the sun wasn't sure if it should touch my windows or leave me in peace. I moved through the house with a quiet kind of purpose, the kind a person gets when they're cleaning a wound they refuse to bleed from. Betrayal doesn't need screaming to be loud. Sometimes it whispers through ordinary things. I started at the front door. I unlocked the keypad and slowly pressed a new code, each digit a reminder. I live here. This is my space. When it beeped and flashed green, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled, like sand after a wave pulls back. Next, the Wi-Fi. I sat on the dining chair, entered the settings, and changed the password. Something simple only I would remember, something rooted in who I used to be before I let convenience turn into access. It wasn't anger. It was maintenance. A boundary doesn't always slam shut. Sometimes it slides into place softly. Then the grocery delivery app. Their snack orders, late-night drinks, healthy meal kits they never cooked, gone with a swipe, streaming accounts, cabinets, little automatic comforts they'd taken as proof of ownership in a home they didn't fund or protect. One by one, I closed doors they didn't even realize were open. I didn't rush. I moved like someone putting away the last pieces of a holiday season. Quiet, bittersweet, necessary. Every click felt like reclaiming a square inch of my own breathing space. In the hallway closet, while looking for an old binder where I stored receipts, I reached high and knocked over a small box. It tumbled softly, landing on the carpet like it was asking to be noticed. When I opened it, a folded sheet of construction paper lay inside, blue, with uneven cutout hearts glued crooked. His handwriting was big, uneven, and hopeful. "Thank you, Mommy, for taking care of me. I love you forever. Daniel, age 11. I sat right there on the floor. The house didn't feel tight then. It felt hollow. Love from a child is a different kind of currency, innocent, pure, untouched by ego or pride. I ran my thumb over the dried glue, feeling the bumps, remembering that small boy with cereal stuck to his cheek and mismatched socks he swore he picked on purpose. Where did he go? When did "thank you" turn into "stay back and clean"? I pressed the paper to my chest for a moment, not to cling to the memory, but to honor what was real before life twisted into roles we didn't recognize. Then I folded it back gently and returned it to the box. Some things aren't weapons or excuses. They're reminders of what once mattered. I stood again, wiping my palms on my skirt, and returned to the living room. A notification popped onto my television. Someone had tried logging into the streaming account from a new device. I pressed deny and changed the password. It felt like a quiet nod to myself. Not revenge, just closure inching forward on steady feet. Laundry still hung to dry from yesterday. His shirt, her socks. I didn't touch them. They could sit there until they returned. Let them face the stillness they left behind. The kettle clicked. I'd set it on without thinking, habit still living in my bones, even as my mind learned new steps. I poured hot water over a tea bag and watched the color bloom slowly, darkening the mug in slow ribbons. Steam curled like soft breath in cold air. Just as I lifted the cup, my phone buzzed. Their group chat with me, untouched since yesterday. A picture flashed, Jade in oversized sunglasses, lips glossy, holding a passport like it was a trophy. A voice note followed, her tone bright and sugary. First class, baby, this is how you travel. I stared at the screen, not blinking, not flinching. That confidence, that ease, spending my money like it was earned breath. The audacity didn't sting, it informed. It helped me understand just how differently we valued things. I brought the tea to my lips, inhaling slowly before sipping. Warm, quiet, mine. I didn't reply. I didn't react. Silence can be an answer too. They left like royalty departing a kingdom they built, not a house they borrowed comfort from. Rolling suitcases tapped across my hardwood like tiny applause. Jade dragged hers with a little flick of her wrist, as if the bag weighed nothing and the world waited on her arrival. Daniel followed with two more, stacked and balanced like a scene out of a travel commercial. The front door was open wide, morning sun filling the entryway. My living room looked brighter than I felt, the kind of brightness that shows every detail, every forgotten glass, every carpet fiber pressed from footsteps. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel, steady as breath, and stepped to the doorway, not because they asked me to, but because habit sometimes walks ahead of healing. Jade adjusted her sunglasses, that same pair she flashes in every mirror selfie. "We'll text when we land," she said, like I had been waiting for the privilege of receiving her updates. Her perfume floated in the air, floral and expensive, purchased on a card she did not earn. Daniel didn't look at me right away. He took one last dramatic look around the foyer like he was photographing memory, then turned and gave me that practice smile, the one he uses when he wants to feel like a good son without doing the work. "Don't stress yourself cleaning too much," he said, keys dangling from his fingers. "Enjoy the quiet. We'll bring back something nice." The idea that I should feel grateful pulled a small breath from my lungs, but not enough to shake me. Quiet wasn't new. I just finally saw it for what it had become, not peace, but absence. They stepped outside, laughter drifting behind them. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely, not defensive, just grounded. Jade pulled her phone up to record a slow pan of their luggage and her outfit. Fake excitement sparkled in her voice as she narrated something for social media I wasn't invited to watch. I swallowed once, then once more. Pride can be loud, but entitlement performs. Across the street, Mrs. Harris was trimming her rose bushes. She looked up as she heard the suitcases roll and waved cheerfully at them. They waved back, high-energy movie star smiles. Then she saw me in the doorway. Her hand lowered slowly. Her face shifted, not pity, not curiosity, something else, concern wrapped in politeness. We didn't speak, but she nodded once, soft and small, like an acknowledgement only two older women who've lived life can exchange. The kind that says, I don't know what's wrong, but I feel that something is. I nodded back, just as quiet, and she returned to her roses as if trimming thorns could fix anything. Daniel popped the trunk and tossed the bags inside with a little too much flourish. Jade clapped lightly, half joking, half proud. They posed, snapped another photo. I wondered briefly who the audience was, real friends or imagined ones. Sometimes people don't travel for joy. They travel to prove something to strangers. They strutted toward the car, like $14,872 was pocket change, not stolen trust. Daniel finally walked back toward me. He leaned in as if to hug, but only his arms moved. His heart stayed back with the car. I gave him one polite pat on the shoulder, nothing more. He didn't seem to notice the distance. We'll send pictures from the resort, he said. Safe travels. I replied, voice even as polished wood. Then they drove off, engine humming, music playing, windows down like they were riding toward a life that didn't include where they came from. When the car disappeared down the street, I closed the door gently, not a slam, not even firm, just enough to say we're done here for now. Inside, the air felt still again. I walked back to the kitchen, set the towel down, and poured myself another cup of water. Cold, clean, simple. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text banner slid across the screen. Bank update. Charges still under review. I lifted the glass to my lips and let the coolness settle in my throat, heavy and calm. Nothing in the house moved, and neither did I. By early afternoon, sunlight had shifted across the kitchen tiles, drawing long, warm strips along the floor. I stood barefoot on one, feeling the warmth seep into my skin, grounding me right where I was. Not waiting, not wondering, just present. I reached for the radio sitting on the counter, an old one with a dial that never quite lands on the station clean the first time. I turned it slowly until a familiar song floated through, something from when I was young enough to believe life would always reward hard work and sincerity. A soft R&B track, vinyl warmth, the sound of a world that hadn't yet learned to harden me. I let it play low. Peace doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums. I took a cloth, dampened it, and wiped the counter in small circles, steady and slow. Not cleaning to serve anyone, cleaning to claim space. My space. The countertop gleamed under the sunlight, and for a brief second, I caught my own reflection in the kitchen window, still, quiet, composed. The phone rang then, not gently, but like someone trying to break the sound barrier. I let it ring once before answering, just enough to remind myself I controlled the pace here. Mom. Daniel's voice thundered through the line, frantic and loud enough to rattle the silence. Airport noise clattered in the background. Rolling carts, muffled announcements, a baby crying somewhere. What did you do? Our cards aren't going through. The booking. They're saying there's a problem. I switched the cloth from one hand to the other, wiping the other side of the counter. My voice stayed even, calm as polished marble. Oh, what do you mean? Jade took the phone, then, her tone already sharp enough to peel paint. They're saying the reservation was flagged. They won't let us check in. They need the original card holder. They're asking for you to confirm. Fix this. Her panic sounded fresh, unpracticed, like a person who thought the world existed to catch her when she tripped. I'm afraid I don't know what you're referring to, I said softly. She sputtered. You know exactly. Daniel, take the phone. He snatched it back. Mom, this isn't funny. They're holding people behind us. We're holding up the line. This looks ridiculous. Just fix it. I wiped the last corner of the counter, folded the towel in half, and draped it neatly over the sink. Daniel, I said, voice gentle enough to disarm yet firm enough to plant roots in stone. I didn't make any travel plans. I'm at home. Cleaning, remember? They thought they'd glide through a luxury check-in on my $14,872. Instead, their vacation collapsed mid-airport, and I didn't move a muscle. Silence hit the call, so fast it almost crackled. Then a frustrated exhale. Then hurried voices arguing in the background. Then someone from the airline asking them to step aside. Their world was shaking in a public place, and mine was still. I have to go, I said, before they found their next sentence. Safe travels. I tapped the call-ended button before they could shape another plea or accusation. The moment the call cut, the house slipped back into that soft hush again, like nothing had disturbed its breathing. The song on the radio had changed, something slower, richer, a quiet Sunday kind of melody. I leaned on the counter with both hands and closed my eyes for one brief moment. Not from relief, not from victory, just acknowledgement. Sometimes peace isn't gifted. It's built brick by quiet brick. When I opened my eyes, I walked to the drawer near the stove, the one where I keep envelopes, sticky notes, and the tools of a household that's always belonged to me whether anyone noticed or not. I took out a plain manila folder and placed it on the table. No drama, no rush, just intention sharpened into action. I picked up a pen and wrote on the tab in slow, even strokes, payback plan. And then I sat down, not because I was tired, but because strength sometimes looks like stillness before the next step. Didn't rush to write it. There's a different kind of strength in moving slowly, especially when you finally see everything clearly. I made myself a cup of tea first, the kind I always saved for company, though I was the only one here. I sat at the kitchen table, steam rising in gentle curls, and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. Plain, white, unbothered by what was coming. Words matter more when they're calm. I placed my palms flat against the table for just a moment, grounding myself, then picked up my pen. No shaking, not even a tremor. Anger wobbles hands, certainty steadies them. To Daniel and Jade, I wrote at the top, no pet names, no softness. This wasn't a family moment. This was business born from pain. I stated the facts, the charges, the total, the date they were made. No emotion, no accusation, just truth laid out plain. I listed the exact amount. $14,872, so there would be no room for pretending it was anything small or forgettable. I explained that I had disputed the transactions and that I expected full repayment, not someday, not eventually, but through monthly installments starting immediately. I set the terms clearly, equal payments, same date each month, paid directly to me. No negotiation. No excuses. Respect isn't a conversation. It's a requirement. I didn't write how it felt. I didn't write how my chest tightened when I remembered the boy who once asked me to button his little coat before school. I didn't mention the sting of hearing Jade say, "First class, baby," like I was invisible. Emotions lived in another room. This letter lived in fact. When I signed my name at the bottom, Margaret Cole, I paused. Signing your name means claiming your ground. There was no wobble in that ink. I folded the letter once, then again, tucking it into a plain envelope. I addressed another copy for email. Digital proof travels faster than footsteps. Before sending anything, I sat with it a moment, letting the air settle around me like dust in a shaft of morning light. My phone buzzed then, a message from my older sister, Laurel. Just her name alone stirred something soft. She never calls without reason, and she never sends messages without sentiment. I opened it. 3 photos. Old ones. Sun-faded edges. Beach trip from years ago. There I was smiling wide, hair tied back, swimsuit under shorts, water on my legs. Daniel sitting on my back in the sand, his little arms wrapped around my neck, grinning like the world was warm and safe and mine to protect. I stared at the pictures. Not quickly, slowly, the way you look at something that once belonged to you, but now feels like it lives in someone else's memory. My throat tightened, not from sorrow, but from the sharp sweetness of remembering I once carried him without ever thinking he might one day ask me to carry the cost of his life twice. I traced his little face on the screen with my thumb, careful, almost like touching a fragile thing. Love doesn't disappear. It just learns boundaries. Laurel texted a minute later. "Remember this day? You were so happy." I typed back, "Yes." Nothing more. Anything else would have spilled. I placed the phone face down, breathed once, and let the silence settle around those old memories. Then I reopened my laptop and attached a scanned copy of the letter to an email. Subject line, reimbursement agreement. Plain, simple, firm. I made sure every line was visible, no room for confusion, no room for pretending they didn't understand. Then I hit send. Just like that, truth left my house. I sealed the paper copy in its envelope and set it by the door to mail later. Old school proof. Sometimes paper carries more weight than pixels. I wiped a small crumb from the corner of the table, not cleaning for anyone, just clearing space for what was next. Peace doesn't always float in. Sometimes you carve it open inch by inch. My phone buzzed again. Email viewed. Not even 5 minutes had passed. I let out a slow breath, steady and sure. They saw it. Now they knew. And silence filled the room again, no longer heavy, just waiting. When you've spent years sharing your life by habit, reclaiming it feels like walking into a familiar room with new eyes. Nothing changed physically. The same walls, same window light, same creak in the floor near the pantry, yet everything felt different, like the house and I were meeting again, properly, without noise clouding our introduction. I sat at the kitchen counter with my laptop open, a gentle hum filling the room. Not urgency, purpose. I started by checking my accounts, not with paranoia, but with the quiet certainty of someone closing drawers after a storm. The credit card dispute was still pending, a neat little in review beside each transaction. I didn't hover over it. Truth takes its time. Next, I opened settings for my online accounts. Simple ones. Shopping, bill pay, my bank sign-in. I changed passwords, not elaborate codes or complicated strings, just phrases that meant something only to me. Private thoughts turned into keys. It felt like a soft kind of armor. I turned off saved payment options on websites, clicked remove card wherever I found it. Little buttons, small confirmations, like stitching a hem by hand, slow, steady, permanent. I didn't slam digital doors. I closed them with care. Care doesn't mean softness. Sometimes it means choosing dignity over drama. By the time I finished, the house felt quieter. Not empty, dignified. Ownership doesn't make noise. It settles in. My stomach grumbled then, reminding me I'd eaten nothing since early morning. Hunger has a way of bringing life back into a room. I walked to the fridge and pulled out simple things. 1 piece of salmon, a handful of spinach, half a lemon. Nothing fancy, nothing big, just enough for me. Funny how feeding yourself intentionally feels almost rebellious after years of plating food for others first. I seasoned the salmon, placed it in the skillet, and listened to it hiss. The sound was comforting, grounding. I stood there watching it cook, golden edges curling, lemon juice sizzling, and it struck me how rare it was to prepare a meal solely for my own body, not as a task or an afterthought. How long had I been cooking out of obligation instead of care? The spinach wilted down to a small pile, bright and soft. I plated everything neatly, 1 plate, 1 fork, 1 napkin, and sat at the table by the window. Afternoon, sunlight stretched across the surface like a gentle hand. I took the first bite slowly. It tasted like something I didn't realize I'd misplaced. Peace. Not celebration. Not relief. Just a quiet reclaiming of self. I ate without distraction, without checking my phone, without listening for footsteps or voices in the house that didn't belong to me. It was simple, and simple felt luxurious. When I finished, I rinsed my plate and placed it in the rack. Only 1 dish, 1 fork. I wiped the table absent-mindedly and caught myself smiling. Not big, not dramatic, just a small, private acknowledgement that I hadn't done that, cooked for myself without guilt, in far too long. As I dried my hands, my phone buzzed across the counter. Then again. I walked over and picked it up, expecting a bank message or maybe Laurel checking in again. Instead, 3 notifications sat on the screen, each stamped with the same message in its own way. Subscription payment failed. Delivery paused. Insufficient authorization. Membership inactive. Billing declined. Their conveniences were losing oxygen. I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. I just stood still for a second, feeling the air shift around me, not heavy, not victorious, just balanced, like the universe had tilted back into place, 1 denied monthly service at a time. I placed the phone face down, wiped my palms on my apron, and let my gaze wander around the kitchen as if seeing each object anew. The kettle, the stack of neatly folded towels, the dish drying rack with 1 fork resting peacefully inside. Nothing in the room asked for me. Nothing in the room took from me. I rested both hands on the counter and inhaled deeply, ribs expanding with fresh clarity. Peace wasn't loud. It was present, and it was mine. The house felt different the next morning, lighter somehow, like it had finally exhaled after holding tension in its beams. I moved through it with an ease I hadn't felt in years. Grief teaches you to tiptoe. Clarity teaches you to walk. I brewed tea again, jasmine this time, letting the soft, floral scent settle into the kitchen. No rush, no heaviness, just presence. When the phone buzzed, I didn't startle. I didn't even reach for it right away. I let it ring until the sound faded into stillness. A message pinged after. Mom, why are all these charges bouncing? I placed the teacup down gently and typed one reply, slow and precise. Please read the letter. Sent. Nothing more. No defending. No explaining. A boundary spoken once is powerful. Spoken twice becomes a negotiation. I sip my tea and let silence do what confrontation never could. Work quietly. The phone vibrated again. Long paragraphs, frustration spilling through screen pixels. I didn't open any of it. I knew the pattern too well. Confusion first, anger second, justification third. I didn't know participation in any of those stages. Instead, I reached for the little terracotta pot I bought months ago and never used. It sat on the windowsill, empty, patient, ignored. Like parts of me, I filled it with fresh soil, dark and soft, the smell rich and honest. Soil doesn't lie. It takes what you give it and returns only what's earned. I placed a small sprig of basil gently into the center, covering its roots with care. My fingers pressed the earth down slowly, forming support instead of weight. I whispered, not to anyone but myself, grow steady. The dirt was cool, grounding, life being tucked into place while another part of mine was being pulled into alignment too. The phone buzzed again. I didn't rush. I watered the basil lightly, watching droplets sink and disappear. Roots need time before leaves boast their green. Quiet work underneath, same as healing. When I finally picked up the phone, the screen was full of messages. One from Jade, clipped in sharp. We need you to fix this. Another from Daniel, less fury, more confusion. Why are you doing this? Old me would have typed explanations. Apologies. Soft padding around truth to make betrayal less uncomfortable for the ones who dealt it. New me typed the same thing again. Please read the letter. No emojis. No punctuation to soften it. Truth gets diluted when you decorate it. I put the phone down, turned my back to it, and stepped outside onto the small back porch. The air held a gentle warmth, enough to loosen the tight corners inside my chest. A breeze moved through, carrying the faint smell of cut grass from some yard down the street. Domestic life continuing around mine. Unaware everything here was rearranging itself quietly and permanently. I sat in the old chair that always rocked slightly when I leaned back, crossed one ankle over the other, and watched a lone bird hop along the fence, pecking at nothing in particular. A simple scene, but simplicity had grown rare. Peace is never loud. It just exists, waiting for you to finally hear it. The kitchen timer dinged softly inside, not for food, just reminding me to check the soil. I stood, went back in, and touched the basil leaves lightly. They glistened with the last drops of water. Tender things survive when tended, even after neglect. My phone vibrated again. This time, only once. Not frantic, not furious, different. I wiped my hands on a towel, walked over, and lifted it. A single message. From Daniel. Short. We need to talk. The kind of sentence that stretches a still room, pulls the air tight again. I stared at the words a moment, the house quiet enough to hear my own breath. Then I set the phone on the counter, not answering yet. Sometimes the first step toward respect is letting someone sit in the pause before you respond. We chose the porch instead of the dining table. Neutral ground without pretending it was warm. I set 2 chairs out, spaced just enough to remind us we weren't the same people who once shared pancakes on Saturday mornings. The sun dipped low, golden light touching the railings like it was blessing everything except us. The air carried that soft end-of-day stillness. Not silence, just quiet, like the world had paused to watch without interfering. Daniel arrived first. He walked across the yard slowly, shoulders tight, trying to look composed. Guilt changes posture before it changes hearts. Jade followed behind him, sunglasses on though the sun wasn't bright anymore. She always dressed like life was a runway she needed applause for walking down. They approached, and I didn't rise to greet them. I just nodded toward the chairs. They sat. The wood creaked under shifting, unsettled energy. "Mom," Daniel started, voice low and trying to sound reasonable. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." A breeze moved through the yard, cool enough to brush my cheek. Across the fence, Mrs. Harris was watering her garden, slow strokes of the hose, eyes focused on her flower bed. She didn't look our way, but her presence grounded me. Life continues. People grow things, and plants never bloom in soil they don't respect. "There isn't a misunderstanding," I said, my voice steady as the porch boards beneath my feet. "You used my card. You booked a luxury trip. You excluded me from the decision and from the trip itself. You assumed access." Jade took off her sunglasses, blinking like the world surprised her. "We were going to pay it back," she said, tone bright and indignant, like indignation justified misuse. "We just hadn't gotten to it yet." "Before or after the spa day?" I asked quietly. She pressed her lips together, like she had bitten into something bitter. I reached beside me and lifted a slim folder, the one labeled payback plan. I slid it across the small table between us. It made a soft sound, paper against wood, but somehow it echoed. Daniel stared at it like it held fire. I drafted terms. I said, monthly payments, due date listed, amount divided evenly, clear and fair. That's $14,872 in writing, so there's no room for forgetting. He flipped through the pages, the paper rustling under his fingers. His eyes moved, slow and heavy. His face tightened, but not from shock, from realizing the excuses he prepared didn't fit here. "Mom," he sighed, "you didn't have to go this far." I held his gaze. I went exactly far enough. Jade leaned back, crossing her arms. "This feels personal," she said, rolling her voice like she was auditioning for sympathy. "You're acting like we're strangers." I rested my palms on my knees, calm, firm. Personal would have been yelling. Personal would have been slamming doors. This is boundaries. This is responsibility. In the yard, Mrs. Harris adjusted her hose, droplets catching the light like small stars falling into the grass. She still didn't look our way, and that somehow made everything feel more real. She didn't need to witness to make truth true. "You could have just talked to us," Daniel murmured, but there was no conviction behind it. He knew. Talking had happened for years. Listening hadn't. "I did," I replied gently. "You just didn't hear me until money listened first." I watched Jade then, her expression tightening into something sharp and careless. She exhaled dramatically, rolling her eyes like a teenager denied a party. A dismissive flick, a gesture that told me she believed entitlement outranked consequence. That small movement, not a word spoken, carved an answer into the moment. I pushed my chair back, wood scraped lightly against the porch as I rose, slow and steady, spine straight, as if the earth itself held me upright. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shake. I simply stood, because sometimes standing is louder than any speech. We moved inside because papers carry more weight at a table. I led the way, not with urgency, but with the steady certainty of someone who has nothing left to defend, only boundaries to build. The house felt still again, the kind of stillness that belongs to clarity, not silence. I placed the repayment agreement on the dining table. No fancy folder this time. Just truth on paper, plain, direct, undeniable. Daniel sat first, shoulders a little lower than before, like the weight of consequence had finally taken a seat with him. Jade hovered a second longer, like she wasn't sure the chair deserved her presence, then sat with a huff, the kind people use when their pride has to share space with accountability. I didn't look at either of them yet. I uncapped a pen, placed it neatly beside the paper, then folded my hands on the table and waited. Patience can feel like pressure when someone knows they're wrong. Daniel exhaled, long and slow, eyes scanning the terms again. Same date every month. He murmured, voice quiet, not confrontational, resigned. Full repayment. No skip months. That's correct, I said. Calm. Even. Intentional. And if something comes up, he asked, but his voice didn't carry entitlement this time. Just uncertainty. The kind grown-ups have when they realize life doesn't bend simply because they want it to. Then you handle it, I replied, like adults do. He nodded once, small but sincere. Jade shifted in her chair, arms crossed tighter. This is dramatic, she muttered under her breath. I did not respond. I didn't need to. The paper answered for me. Daniel picked up the pen. His fingers hesitated at the signature line. For a moment, he stared at it like it was a mirror, one showing him a version of himself he hadn't intended to face. Then he signed, slow strokes, name fully spelled. No shortcuts. He signed beside the balance, $14,872, divided into monthly payments that would remind him gently but firmly where respect begins. He dated it, set the pen down. Jade didn't move, her jaw clenched, eyes darting around like she was searching for an escape hatch that wasn't there. Daniel nudged the paper gently toward her. Just sign, Jade. His tone didn't plead or command. It settled. She signed. Quick, irritated scribble. A signature can tell a whole story. Hers read like annoyance trying to masquerade as confidence. When it was done, I slid the paper toward myself, folded it cleanly, and placed it inside a simple envelope. Not to hide it, to mark completion. A finality settled in the room. Daniel stood, and for a moment he didn't speak. He just looked around the house, not at things, but at memories stitched into corners and walls. His gaze landed on the hallway shelf. On that photo, the three of us from years ago, when his smile reached his eyes and my arms wrapped around him like protection, was the only thing I knew how to give. He paused there, really paused. His eyes softened, then dropped to the floor. Guilt isn't always loud. Sometimes it passes through like a shadow crossing light, brief but undeniable. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to narrate what he felt. We both knew. Jade tapped her foot impatiently, keys in her hand like she couldn't wait to step out of a space she hadn't contributed to but had certainly benefited from. Can we go now? She asked, not even trying to hide her irritation. Daniel nodded, faintly, without looking at her. He turned to me instead. We'll stick to the plan, he said. His voice carried both promise and recognition, not gratitude, just realization. Growth often starts in that small, uncomfortable gap. I nodded back. Good. No hug. No dramatic moment. Just clarity hanging in the air, like a quiet new law. They walked toward the door. I didn't follow. I stood still, spine straight, feet grounded, hands resting lightly on the back of my chair. Their footsteps faded down the walkway, muffled by distance and pride. When the door clicked shut, the house breathed again. I walked to the counter, pulled a small notepad toward me, and wrote 4 steady words at the top of a clean page. First payment due in a week. I underlined it once. Not anger, not hope, just fact. And facts don't waver. The week passed without drama. No banging on doors, no raised voices, no desperate messages. Just time, steady and unbothered. I marked each day with a quiet check on the calendar, a small pencil tick, nothing dramatic. People underestimate pencils. Ink assumes permanence. Pencil honors truth. Life changes, and so can terms. On the morning the first payment was due, I woke before my alarm. I always did when something mattered. The sky was still soft, that early blue that looks like it's thinking about becoming day, but hasn't decided yet. I stood at the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a warm mug, watching a single bird walk the fence line like it owned every inch of that wood. There's power in moving like you belong somewhere. 8 o'clock came, then 9. A little after 10, my phone lay still on the counter. No chime, no vibration, nothing. I didn't sigh. I didn't pace. I simply glanced at the clock, placed my mug in the sink, and walked to my bedroom closet. Inside, hanging near the front, was a soft cream blouse I hadn't worn in a long time. It wasn't new. I'd owned it for years, but I always saved it for days when I wanted to feel prepared. Not special, not glamorous, just present in my life, not passing through it. I took it off the hanger and laid it across the ironing board. The iron warmed with that familiar low hum, puffing a little cloud of heat before settling into its steady rhythm. I smoothed the fabric, letting my palm linger along the sleeve. It felt good to touch something of mine, something that existed purely because I wanted it, not because someone else needed me to wear or wash or fix something for them. I worked slowly, small circles, gentle pressure. Steam rose in thin wisps. The blouse flattened, wrinkles surrendering beneath iron and patience. When you iron, you face each crease. Some lift easily. Some need heat. Most smooth out if you're steady enough. My phone buzzed then, once sharp brief. I didn't reach for it yet. I finished the left sleeve, then the right, then the collar. Nothing rushed, nothing frantic. Ironing is not about fabric. It is about care. And sometimes the first thing a woman remembers to care for is herself. When the blouse was finished, I hung it neatly and took one long breath in the silence. Not a heavy breath, a clean one. Then I picked up my phone. A text from Daniel. Running behind. We'll pay today. I didn't type frustration. I didn't offer softness or indignation. I simply responded, per the agreement, a late fee has been added. New total, $14,872. Please send by end of day. No emotion. No punctuation beyond what belonged. Not cold, clear. Truth shouldn't tremble when spoken. Minutes passed like slow drops of water in a sink, steady, inevitable. I made myself lunch, just a simple sandwich cut neatly down the middle. I sat at the table alone, not lonely, eating without hurry, without guilt, without the sense I should be doing something else for someone else. Halfway through my last bite, my phone buzzed again. A notification. Payment received. Just like that. Quiet. Simple. Complete. No apology attached. No explanation. Just money moving from where it shouldn't have been to where it belonged. I set my fork down, not because of surprise, but because my body wanted stillness for a second, a moment to acknowledge that dignity, once chosen, creates its own gravity. I wiped my mouth with a cloth napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it beside my plate. Then I stood, smoothing the front of my pants as I walked to the living room, not to celebrate, just to exist in a space I no longer had to share with entitlement. The air smelled faintly of lavender from a candle I had lit earlier. I sat in my armchair, legs crossed, hands resting gently in my lap. The blouse hung in the hallway, crisp and clean. A reminder that preparation is not for show. It's a promise to yourself that you will meet your life as someone present, not someone passed over. Payment done. First box checked. Quiet victory, the kind that doesn't need witnesses to be real. I didn't plan a grand escape. No bucket list, no flashy destination. Just a quiet beachfront hotel 2 towns over. Somewhere the ocean could breathe for me if my own lungs got tired. I packed light. A soft sweater, 2 dresses, slippers, and a book I had started years ago and never finished. Not because I couldn't find the time, but because I kept giving my time away. This time, I kept it for myself. The drive was gentle. No heavy traffic, no noise, just the slow hum of tires rolling over asphalt and the rare bird cutting through sky. The kind of drive where you don't check the clock. You don't rush. You just arrive when your spirit does. When I checked in, the receptionist greeted me with the kind of smile people reserve for strangers they hope to meet again. "Welcome," she said softly, handing me the room key. No fuss, no questions, just presence. I liked that. My room looked out over the ocean, not the dramatic type with angry waves, just calm water folding over itself like it was tucking into bed. I stood by the window for a long moment, listening, not to sounds, but to the quiet inside me. Stillness can sound like healing if you don't rush it away. I walked the shore barefoot before sunset, letting the sand press soft circles into my feet. Each step felt like forgiveness. I didn't know anyone else, only myself. The water touched my ankles once, cool and brief, a reminder that life can bless gently too. Later, I sat on a small terrace overlooking the beach, a warm mug cupped in my hands. People walked below in slow pairs, but no one rushed, no one performed. A few children chased foam near the shore. Their laughter rose like wind chimes in summer air. Simple joy, earned peace. A chair scraped nearby. Another older woman settled 2 tables over, silver hair pinned back, loosely, eyes soft but knowing. She held a book, not open, just resting under her palm. We didn't introduce ourselves. We didn't need to. Women who've lived enough rarely force connection. It arrives on its own. After a few quiet minutes, she glanced over and gave a gentle smile, the kind that doesn't pry. Then, voice low, she murmured to the ocean more than to me, "Sometimes distance saves us." I looked out at the water again, letting her words sit with me. "Sometimes coming back to yourself does too," I answered softly, not moving my gaze. She nodded once, slow, and returned to her stillness. We didn't speak again. And somehow that was more comforting than conversation. Later, in my room, I took a long hot bath, letting the steam unravel places tension had curled itself into without asking. I washed my hair gently, rubbed lotion into my hands like they deserved care, just for existing, not for what they could do for others. I slipped into a soft nightgown, fabric cool against clean skin, and pulled the covers over my legs as I sat by the window again. The sky outside deepened into evening, purple first, then blue, then almost black with scattered stars. A single boat light blinked far out at sea. I watched it drift like a quiet promise that not every journey needs to be loud to be true. When my phone vibrated on the nightstand, I didn't rush. I let the screen light the dark before I reached for it. Missed call, then a voicemail from Daniel. I hesitated, thumb hovering. The ocean whispered against the shore outside, steady and sure, like the world reminding me that life doesn't stop for heartache or pride. It moves forward whether we cling or release. I pressed play. His voice was soft, not defeated, not angry, just stripped of certainty. "Mom, can we talk? Please." He sounded like someone who finally felt the distance. I set the phone down gently, screen facing the ceiling. Waves rolled, night deepened, and I breathed slow, full, and entirely my own. When I returned home, the house felt familiar, yet unfamiliar, like furniture rearranged in a dream. I set my small suitcase by the door, hung my sweater, and let my keys rest in the ceramic dish by the entry. The silence wasn't empty. It felt earned. A peace I had chosen, not stumbled into. A knock came not long after. Gentle, not hurried, not demanding, just a knock. I opened the door to find Daniel standing there alone, hands in his pockets, shoulders drawn inwards like he wasn't sure if he should take up space. No wife beside him, no sunglasses, no performance. Just my son, older than the boy I raised, younger than the man he wants to be. "Hey, Mom," he said quietly. I nodded. "Come in." He stepped inside and looked around as if trying to measure the room differently, like silence meant something new now. I didn't offer him food or drink, not out of spite, just clarity. Not every gathering needs hosting. Some need honesty instead. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where homework was once done, where birthday candles had melted into frosting, where arguments and apologies had both lived. The wooden surface held memory, but not weight today. Daniel cleared his throat. "I listened to your message," he began, voice steadying itself. "And I've had time to think." I folded my hands loosely. "Go on." He took a breath, one that seemed to stretch his chest a little wider, like he had to make room for humility. "I wasn't fair to you. I wasn't respectful. I took you for granted." He looked down at the table, then back up. "I'm sorry." The apology didn't rush. It didn't wobble. It stood. That mattered more than volume ever could. "I hear you," I replied gently. No dramatic forgiveness, no emotional release, not because I didn't feel, but because forgiveness is not a performance. It's a path, and paths take steps. He nodded once, relief brushing across his face like a quiet breeze. "I've made the payments, and I'll finish the last one on time." I gave Jade her portion. This is on me. Responsibility. Finally wearing its proper name. "That's good," I said. And I'm glad you came alone. He swallowed, eyes glancing toward the hallway like memories were threaded through the walls. Jade didn't agree with this visit, he admitted softly, but I needed to come anyway. Growth isn't always applause-worthy. Sometimes it's a sentence spoken softly without audience. I stood then, not abruptly, just transitioning into motion. Wait here, I said, and walked down the hallway to my bedroom. Inside my dresser, tucked in the back of the third drawer, was a small toy, a tiny red race car chipped on one side, wheels still intact. He had left it there when he was little, hiding it because he thought grown-ups didn't see hiding places. I kept it, not because I needed reminders, but because motherhood holds moments even when children forget them. I lifted it gently and held it a breath longer than necessary. Childhood has a way of shrinking down into objects when people grow without noticing. I placed the toy inside a small velvet-lined box I kept for sentimental things. Not jewelry, not valuables, memories with quiet breath. Then I returned to the kitchen and set the box on the table between us. He blinked in surprise. What's this? A reminder, I said softly, of who you were and who you can still be. Not owed, not expected, just possible. His eyes softened, the way clouds thin when sunlight tries to return. He didn't touch the box yet. He just looked at me, a flicker of something new in his expression, not dependence, not defiance, something steadier. Recognition, maybe. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We didn't pretend wounds disappear just because words have been spoken, but there was understanding across that table, quiet and earned. He stood. One payment left. He said, "Yes," I replied. And that was enough. He left with the same gentle knock he arrived with, and I closed the door softly behind him, not as goodbye, but as acknowledgement. Sometimes doing better is quieter than the harm was, and quiet finally belonged to me. The morning they were due to bring the final payment, the house felt rested. I woke naturally, not from alarms, not from worry, just from light quietly touching my eyelids like a whisper that a new chapter had arrived. I moved through my home the way someone enters a place newly purchased, even though I'd lived here for years. I opened windows. Fresh air drifted in. The curtains lifted gently. Peace doesn't need applause. It just needs room. I brewed tea, the same blend I had chosen the day after they left for that trip. Funny how routines change, meaning depending on who you become inside them. By the time the clock touched 10, I had wiped the counters, straightened the chairs, and swept the floor with long, even strokes. Not rushing, not preparing for anyone, just caring for the space that holds me. A knock sounded, firm but not impatient. I walked to the door, calm steps, spine straight. When I opened it, Daniel stood there alone again, hands clasped, posture thoughtful. No bags, no noise, no ego, just my son in plain clothes, holding a white envelope like a weight he was finally ready to carry without my hands beneath his. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Morning," I replied. He held out the envelope. Inside, a cashier's check. Crisp edges. No hesitation. He didn't speak while I opened it. Didn't shift or fidget. Just waited, not for approval, but for acknowledgement. Growth shows up differently when someone isn't trying to be seen. I examined the check, read the amount, then folded it neatly and placed it on the counter beside us. No praise, no ceremony, just closure resting quietly between responsibilities and respect. I finished the schedule, he said softly. All of it. I nodded. You kept your word. He breathed out, not relief, not exhaustion, just a release of something old, something that didn't fit him anymore. I don't expect things to go back the same, he added. His voice didn't crack, but it carried truth carefully, like it had been cleaned before speaking. I just wanted to show you I can stand on my own. I didn't rush to respond. Silence filled the doorframe, not uncomfortable, just honest. Then I handed him a folded sheet of paper. My handwriting walked across it, measured and clear. Boundaries. Respect going forward. No shared finances. Support by choice, not expectation. Love without debt. Not punishment. Not distance. Just structure. A home for dignity to live in. He held the paper a moment, thumb brushing its edge. I understand, he said softly. His eyes flicked inside the house. Not greedy, not entitled, just remembering. His gaze landed briefly on the little velvet box from last time, resting on the corner shelf. He didn't ask about the toy inside. He didn't need to. Some things you honor by not touching. I'll go, he murmured, stepping back one quiet pace. Take care of yourself. I said, I will. He turned and walked down the path. No dramatic goodbye. No lingering. Sometimes healing doesn't have fireworks, just footsteps moving in the right direction. I closed the door gently and leaned against it, not from exhaustion, but from recognition. That chapter, long, heavy, real, had closed on both sides. I walked to the kitchen slowly, letting the quiet settle around my bones like a warm shawl. Sunlight stretched across the floor, catching the shine of the freshly swept tiles. For a moment, the house glowed, not empty, not waiting, but full of air I could breathe without shrinking. I stood there in the middle of my kitchen, alone, steady, whole. The refrigerator hummed softly. The tea still steamed on the counter. Outside, a bird hopped along the fence, claiming its little corner of the world without apology. I pressed my palm to the counter, grounding myself in the simple truth of the moment. I didn't lose my son. I released the version of him that didn't see me. That is a different kind of strength, one nobody claps for, but every woman who's lived long enough understands. That envelope held the last of the $14,872, not just money returned, but dignity restored dollar by dollar. And quietly, with no one watching, I smiled. Small. Real. Enough. He told me to clean the house. So I did. I started with my life.